When I look back on it now, it all feels almost too perfect, too neatly written, like something fate had planned long before either of us realized it. At the time, though, it didn't feel romantic. It felt practical. Rent was brutal. My scholarship barely covered tuition, and my part-time job at the coffee shop wasn't exactly making me rich. By the middle of sophomore year, I was desperate for a roommate, someone who could help split the bills and keep me from drowning financially. That's how Jordan happened. We met at a party I hadn't even wanted to go to. I was standing in the corner with a flat Coke, halfway planning my escape, when someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you're still looking for a roommate, right?" I turned around, and there he was. Jordan. He had this easy confidence that made him impossible not to notice. Tall, broad-shouldered, sun-streaked hair falling in soft, messy curls like it had no business looking that good without effort. He'd been on the football team his freshman year before an injury took him out, but he still carried himself like an athlete, relaxed, grounded, completely sure of his place in the world. And then there was his smile. The kind that didn't just light up a room. It invited you into it. "Yeah," I said a little too quickly. He held out his hand.
Jordan.
"My lease is up next month. You got space." It should have been simple. Two guys trying to save money. That was it. But the second we shook hands, something tightened in my chest. Something I didn't want to name. We signed the lease the next week. The apartment was tiny. Thin walls, creaky floors, a heater that sounded like it was dying every time it turned on. But it was close to campus, cheap enough to survive, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe I could breathe. Until I realized who I was living with. See, I'd known I liked guys since high school. I wasn't out to everyone, but I wasn't lying to myself either. I'd made peace with that part of me. What I hadn't made peace with was living every day with someone who looked exactly like the kind of guy I'd always fall for. And Jordan made it very clear very early that he was straight. A few weeks after moving in, we were unpacking and half watching something dumb on TV when he leaned back against the couch and said, casually, "Just so you know, I'm straight. In case that matters." He said it like a joke, like he was teasing me, like maybe he already knew the effect he had on me and wanted to shut the door before I ever got close to it. I laughed and said, "Doesn't matter to me. Rent's rent, right?" But it did matter, because once he drew that line, I couldn't stop seeing how badly I wanted to cross it. Jordan had a way of leaving himself everywhere. His cologne in the hallway, steam still fogging the bathroom mirror after his shower, his gym bag by the door, his voice drifting from the kitchen at midnight. He'd sprawl across the couch shirtless after working out, one hand scrolling through his phone, the other tossing popcorn into his mouth like he had no idea what that did to me. And for a guy who claimed to be straight, he had a habit of making things worse. He'd sling an arm over the back of the couch behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. He'd call me pretty boy in this half-joking tone that made my stomach flip. He'd wander into my room in pajama pants hanging low on his hips and ask if I wanted food like he hadn't just knocked the air out of my lungs. Every time, I told myself not to read into it. Every time I failed. We slipped into routines fast. Late-night movies. Shared takeout. Grocery runs. Laundry piled up in the same corner. Quiet conversations that stretched way past midnight. We watched terrible horror movies, trashy reality shows, old action films we both pretended were ironic favorites. Sometimes we barely watched anything at all. We'd just sit there talking. Childhood stories. Exes. Family stuff. The future. Fears neither of us admitted out loud to anyone else. And somewhere in all of that, something changed. It was never obvious. Never enough to prove anything. Just little things. His fingers brushing mine in the chip bowl and not pulling away. His leg bumping against mine on the couch and staying there. The way he laughed at even my worst jokes. The way he looked at me sometimes, really looked at me before catching himself and glancing away. One day I came home and found him wearing my hoodie. I stared. "You know you own clothes, right?" He looked down at himself and shrugged. "Yours is softer. You've got like 3 hoodies." "Yeah," he said, grinning. "But this one smells like your shampoo." Then he turned back to the microwave like he hadn't just reset my entire nervous system. I tried not to overthink it. I overthought it immediately. Everything between us felt like pressure building behind glass. Every shared blanket during movie nights. Every brush of his knee. Every stupid nickname. Every glance that lasted half a second too long. Then one night I made a mistake. We were watching some awful horror movie, and Jordan had spent the entire time talking over it, doing voices, making predictions, ruining every jump scare. "You ruin scary movies," I said. He grinned. "Correction. I make scary movies better." I rolled my eyes. "You're lucky or pretty." The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room went still. The TV kept crackling in the background, but everything else froze. Jordan looked at me, slow and unreadable, then smiled. "Flattered," he said softly. "You're not so bad-looking yourself." Then he reached for more chips and went back to the movie like he hadn't just flipped my entire world sideways. That was the problem with Jordan. Nothing ever happened clearly. Nothing ever crossed the line, but everything brushed against it. And then came the night that changed everything. It was after 2 in the morning. I'd just gotten out of the shower, towel around my waist, hair dripping, assuming I had the apartment to myself because the place was dark and his boots weren't by the door. I walked into my room, started drying off, and the door opened. "Hey, did you?" Jordan stopped dead. I turned, half-dressed, and we both stared. He stood there in the doorway, eyes wide. I grabbed for the towel. "Jesus, knock much?" "Sorry," he said quickly, but he didn't move right away. "I thought you were asleep." I pulled on a shirt, trying to sound normal when I asked, "You good?" He looked everywhere, but at me. Then, under his breath, he said, "Your back's nice." I blinked. "What?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Forget it." And then he left. No teasing. No joke. No cover-up. I sat on the edge of my bed afterward with my heart racing, realizing for the first time that maybe I wasn't imagining all of it. After that, he changed. Subtle things at first. He started asking questions, real ones. "Have you ever dated anyone seriously? What kind of guy do you usually go for? Have you ever had a crush on a friend? Do you think that actor's actually hot, or is that just internet hot?" He always asked like he was joking, like it was casual, but his eyes were never casual. Neither were the compliments. "You've got nice skin," he said once while I was shaving. I looked at him through the mirror. "That's a weird thing to say." He shrugged. "Just saying." Then he walked away, leaving me staring at my reflection like it held answers. The tension between us got so thick it felt like a third person living in the apartment. And eventually it snapped. It was raining that night. Cold, relentless rain that made the whole world feel smaller. We were on the couch with takeout containers on the table and some bad sitcom playing in the background when Jordan nudged my knee with his. "So," he said, staring at the TV, "you ever hook up with your roommates?" I turned to look at him. "What?" He gave a nervous little laugh. "Just asking. Feels like the kind of thing that happens." "I haven't," I said slowly. "Have you?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Not with a guy." The room went quiet. I should have let it go. Instead, I said, "You've been acting weird lately." His eyes flicked to mine. "Weird how?" Asking about my love life. Making comments. Looking at me like what? "Like you're hitting on me." The words landed hard between us. He straightened. "I'm not gay." "I didn't say you were." "Then stop making it weird." I stared at him. "I'm not the one climbing into my room in the middle of the night and staring at me half-naked, Jordan." He stood so fast, he nearly knocked over the takeout. "You know what? This was a mistake." "What was?" "This. Living together. All of it." I stood too. "Then say it. Say there's nothing here, and mean it." He looked at me, jaw tight, chest rising and falling. "There's nothing going on," he said. But his voice cracked. And that crack told me more than his words ever could. He looked away first. "I'm going to bed." The door shut behind him hard enough to shake the frame. I stayed awake for hours. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional groan of old pipes. I kept staring at the ceiling, replaying everything, wondering if I'd finally pushed too far. Then, sometime after 2, I heard his door open. Bare footsteps crossed the floor. I looked up, and there he was standing in my doorway. He didn't speak. He just walked in, came to the side of my bed, and climbed in beside me. Not like a joke. Not like an accident. Not like he needed somewhere else to sleep. He turned onto his side and faced me. The space between us disappeared. "Jordan," I whispered. "What are you doing?" He swallowed. "I can't keep pretending." My whole body went still. He reached for my wrist, barely touching it. "You were right. I have been acting weird. I've been trying to tell myself it doesn't mean anything, but it does." His voice shook. I've never felt like this before. Not with a guy. Not with anyone. And I don't know what to call it, and that scares the hell out of me. "Then why are you here?" I asked. He moved closer, forehead almost touching mine. "Because pretending I don't want you is worse." I don't think I breathed. He looked terrified. Open. Honest in a way I had never seen before. "I don't need you to figure everything out tonight," I told him. He let out a shaky laugh. "Good. Because I definitely can't." Then he looked at my mouth. Not a glance. Not one of those maybe I imagined it moments. A real look. "Are you going to kiss me?" I whispered. He hesitated. "Do you want me to?" "Yes," I said. "But only if it's real." So he kissed me. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was touching something fragile. His hand came up to my face, and I could feel it trembling. Mine were shaking too. When we pulled apart, he looked at me like he couldn't believe I was real either. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted. "You don't have to," I said. "Not tonight." So we just stayed there, holding each other. And for the first time since he'd moved in, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. I woke up with his arm around my waist. For one disorienting second, I thought I'd dreamed all of it. Then he shifted behind me, warm and solid and real, and I knew I hadn't. When I turned to face him, he was still asleep, hair a mess, face soft, looking younger somehow without all that confidence he wore for the rest of the world. I brushed my thumb against his cheek before I could stop myself. His eyes opened, and when he saw me, he smiled. Not a smirk, not a teasing grin, just a soft, sleepy, honest smile. "Morning," he murmured. "Morning." We lay there in silence for a second, both of us feeling the weight of what had changed. Then he said, "I meant what I said last night." So did I. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair away from my forehead. "Can I kiss you again?" I answered by leaning in. This kiss was different. Less afraid. Still careful, but warmer. Fuller. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I'm scared." "I know, but I'm more scared of going back to lying to myself." I put my hand over his chest and felt his heartbeat under my palm. "Then don't," I said. That morning, we didn't define anything. We just got up and made breakfast like we always did, except now when our fingers brushed over mugs and plates, neither of us pulled away. Later, at the grocery store, he stayed close to me the whole time. At one point, he leaned in and murmured, "That woman in produce definitely thinks we're dating." I raised an eyebrow. "We kind of are." His grin was immediate. "Yeah, I guess we are." He didn't take my hand then, but he didn't move away either. We told people slowly. A few close friends first, then more when it felt right. Some were surprised. Some were thrilled. A few needed a minute, but the people who mattered stayed. Jordan was still figuring himself out, and I let him do it in his own time. No pressure. No labels he wasn't ready for. Just honesty. That became our rhythm. His hoodie ended up on my side of the room. My coffee order became his. He started falling asleep in my bed more often than his. We moved through campus a little closer each week until one day we weren't leaving space between us at all. At a cafe near campus, one of Jordan's old teammates spotted us sitting too close in a booth and raised an eyebrow. "You two a thing now?" I felt my stomach drop. Jordan hesitated only for a second. Then he reached under the table, laced his fingers through mine, and said, "Yeah, we are." The guy just smiled. "Cool. Took you long enough." When he left, I looked at Jordan. You okay?
He squeezed my hand.
Better than okay. A month later, Jordan suggested we spend a weekend at a cabin. No friends, no campus, no noise, he said. Stirring honey into his tea like this was a normal suggestion and not the most disgustingly romantic thing he'd ever said. Just us. The cabin sat by a lake, tucked into a stretch of trees where everything smelled like pine and cold air and possibility. We spent the first night on the porch in borrowed flannel, watching the sun sink gold across the water. Jordan leaned his head on my shoulder and whispered, "This feels right." And I knew he meant more than the view. That weekend, for the first time, he talked about everything without flinching. How he'd spent years forcing himself into a version of manhood that felt safe instead of true. How football and girls and all the swagger had been easier than asking himself harder questions. How meeting me hadn't changed him so much as stripped away the part of him that had been pretending. "I think I always knew," he said quietly by the fire that night. "I just didn't know how to be honest." I took his hand. "You are now." He looked at me and smiled in this quiet, unguarded way I knew I'd spend the rest of my life chasing. By the time we got back from the cabin, nothing was magically easier.
There were still stares sometimes.
Still awkward questions. Still moments where fear crept in around the edges. But there was something stronger than fear now. There was us. One night, weeks later, we were folding laundry in the living room. Jordan held up one of my oldest shirts, the one with the faded logo and the hole near the collar, and pulled it over his head. I laughed. "You're still stealing my clothes?" He walked over, slid his arms around my waist, and said, "It's not stealing if it's ours now." Then he kissed the tip of my nose and, with absolutely no hesitation at all, said, "I love you." My heart stopped, then started again twice as hard. "I love you too," I said. And standing there in the middle of our messy apartment, surrounded by laundry, dishes, and all the ordinary clutter of a life shared honestly, I realized something. The apartment hadn't changed. The bed hadn't gotten smaller. We had just stopped leaving space between us. Have you ever had someone in your life pretend to be someone they weren't, until love finally gave them the courage to be honest? Or maybe you were the one hiding how you really felt. Share your story in the comments. We read every one. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for more powerful love stories.